It often happens already in the beginning of the psychotherapy that the symptoms disappear.
Hello, welcome to the new episode of the Common Concern podcast. Today, I'm very pleased to talk to our friend, special guest, Dr. Alf Gerlach. Alf is a very senior psychoanalyst, and actually his life as well as his intellectual trajectory overlaps with this department work in multiple ways, because one of the major inspiration for our work is the Frankfurt School, which combines, especially the early Frankfurt School, which combines psychoanalysis with Marxist theory, which now I learned actually was also an inspiration for Alf when you were young. And then Alf himself combined psychoanalysis with social critiques and research. And most importantly, Alf has been a key member in German or even European community of psychotherapists who engage with Chinese colleagues over the last 40 years, who has really, I just learned that you and your colleagues are trained 1,600 psychotherapists in China, which is a remarkable achievement with huge social impacts, as we can imagine. The topic today, we can have so many things to talk about, but I choose one specific topic is what I call the social unconscious. The reason I choose this topic has something to do actually with what we discussed in the last episode about what the common concerns approach is about. When I told people, the common concerns approach is an approach that aimed at working on public consciousness, many academics feel very surprised or even disturbed. They say, isn't it a bit dangerous? Or isn't it too patronizing, your work on people's consciousness? Somehow sounds a bit religious or scary. But then I say, no, this is the most elementary fact of our work. What do? We collect information, we think, we analyze, and then we write articles and publish. So the article will be read by some readers. And I simply cannot imagine anyone can read the article, especially academic article, unconsciously. The reading is a very conscious act, and the reading is meant to dialogue with that person's consciousness. So the reader's consciousness, and by extension, the public consciousness, in my view, is the first, the primary, and very often the only interface between our work and the world. So to say that we aim to work on public consciousness, for me, is a very simple statement of elementary fact. But then what I found interesting is that actually I did not realize that part of my work until very recently. I have been doing research, over 30 years, but I was never thinking my own research work in this way is working on people's consciousness, and I should do something to change consciousness. Never thought in this way. So then I come to the realization I have been working with a tremendous amount of social unconscious. Probably I was very conscious about what I'm going to write and etc., but I was very unconscious about the social process, the social condition of my labor. So here, I think this, individual consciousness and social unconsciousness is very relevant to develop, to think about our common concerns approach. But I think by extension, probably is also very important to analyze a range of social issues. So I wanted to hear very much, Alf, what do you think of this conscious and unconsciousness? But before that, I want to hear more about your personal life. As I mentioned, you grew up in post-war Germany and influenced by critical thinking and interested in consciousness question. Therefore, you become a psychoanalyst. Then China. Can you tell us your own life trajectory?
Yes, what may be the most important moment was really the decision to go as a young student of sociology to Frankfurt and to learn from the Frankfurt School, Habermas, Horkheimer, Adorno, Marcuse, and to become interested in a field where social researchers, sociologists, and psychoanalysts worked together already in the 30s of last century. But again, after the return of the former immigrants, from United States to Frankfurt, and I learned a lot about how to think about our own culture, our being embedded in an environment, not only our own family, but also cultural beliefs, cultural backgrounds we are often not conscious about. But especially after I started to work in China, and China is so different from the Western culture, I had to deal with my own difficulties, with my own astonishment about how can people feel and think so different as I am used to. Because, of course, I have been based in traditional Western thinking, starting even in my school time with Greek and Latin language and reading the old European philosophers. But now being confronted with a quite different world, in the structure of thinking, in the structure of believing, and of course also in the daily attitudes and approaches. So this has been my own way.
Can I ask a little more about your first turning point? You said, as a young sociology student, you went to Frankfurt. And if we say sociology at that time was very much a conscious way of thinking society. And what made you interested in psychoanalysis? Why you moved from sociology to psychoanalysis? Because you became interested in another aspect of consciousness question?
This happened in my time in Frankfurt, studying still sociology, but also social psychology. And social psychology in Frankfurt was mainly influenced by psychoanalysis. And I wrote my diploma thesis about the topic, the change from the authoritarian character or authoritarian personality. This has been the research of Adorno, Horkheimer, also Marcuse has been involved in it, to the so-called narcissistic personality of this time. At this time in psychoanalysis, a new approach appeared to narcissism, to think about the own self. And it was also used by sociologists to describe the main personality tendencies of this time. Maybe it has been a link to the development of a consumer society in Germany. And this may be interesting now again, if we think about actual China, and how is Chinese personality built up, and what does it mean today, living in China, and especially in the large agglomerations of the cities, living in such a consumer society where wish fulfillment in the next moment can be always given.
Great. So last night, actually, we had a wonderful conversation. And I think one of the most interesting moments was that we were talking about how you sit with your clients, right? You will not sit face to face. But in my work, when I talk to people or when I give interviews, which now
Yes.
also become part of my work, I must see it face to face. So can you describe to us what is your work is like, how you talk to your patients in order for his or her unconsciousness emerge to the surface, become conscious?
Yeah. Let us first speak about the setting.
Mm-hmm.
You told me that you look directly in the eyes of the other one. And we started to think about what happens in online conversations where you can't look directly in the eyes of the other one, but also in psychotherapy. Psychodynamic psychotherapy means to sit in a 90-degree form of the two chairs.
Yeah.
So I have always the possibility to turn my head to
away.
my patient, to look him in the eyes and turn away again. And the patient as well as myself, I need these interruptions of turning away, of looking outside, for instance, in my garden. Yeah. It's a moment of coming back to my own self, a moment of a dreaming-like state. Okay. This happens in psychodynamic psychotherapy. In psychoanalysis proper, patient is lying at the couch. He can't see me. He can't look directly in my face. The lying setting allows him to come near to a sleep-like state of mind. Yeah, we call it regression. We go back to a lower level of consciousness, and also that he can't orient himself at my reactions in my face is important. So he may feel not controlled by my own reactions, absolutely not influenced how I may unconsciously judge about what he may just report to me. So he is more free to follow the flow of his associations, and this is the main task for him. And my main task is listen. Listen. Okay.
But also you intervene, right? At some moment, you will say something.
Yeah. And we, in psychoanalysis, we differentiate between three forms of interventions. First is clarification. Sometimes I must just ask, how many family members have been present in this moment, what you just told about? Clarification. The next is confrontation. This is a very important tool. Yeah?
Sounds a bit of scary, confrontation, yes.
Yeah. Patient is just speaking about something, and then he stops. And this is a sign, oh, there's a defense. And I guess he may know already more. So I may ask him, really? For instance, he is discussing a conflict with his boss, and his fear to stand up and to fight with the boss, to oppose him. And he can't explain why he is not able to do it. And I ask him, really? So it's opening a questioning himself again. And a new flow of associations may appear. The third topic, or the third kind of interventions, we call it interpretation. This is to link some events from the past with the actual life of the patient, and sometimes also with what happens between the patient and me, what we call the actual relationship or the transference and countertransference between patient and therapist. But here is always the best if the patient finds himself his interpretation. And I can only help him to overcome his defenses. And then, in a sudden, he may say, oh, now I can feel it. Okay.
Okay, great. So the interpretation is not something simply going through in your own mind as a psychotherapist, but actually you are making suggestions, could be quite subtle suggestions, encouraging the patient to see connections and come up with interpretations.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
This is my main task, to work about his defenses and to allow him, always to go on, feel free.
Yeah.
I don't judge you.
That's extremely interesting because it sounds in a way very similar to what we want to do, which is to let the thought emerge from that person, him or herself. At least he or she should feel that is a thought not imposed on them, but it is something they figured out by working through their experiences. But then it is also appear to be very different, your method and our method, because your method is let the unconsciousness emerge to become consciousness.
Yeah.
But what we do is actually to start with consciousness, but then turn the consciousness into, probably we can call hyper consciousness. It's a critical consciousness. Start analyzing and reflecting and come up with some theoretical insights, not a formal academic theory, but theory about life. So this is why, for me, the 180-degree setting is very important, because I need to see the eyes, and I want to directly, because I'm working on the conscious level, it's not to let them to relax, let some suppressed feeling emerge, but is to think more clearly. You know this is a problem already, but you just feel you're trapped in it. A bit of like your moment of confrontation, the real question. But you know that there's a problem. You want to solve the problem, but you feel there's so many difficulties. But what exactly you feel the most difficult? Why you feel take a certain step is simply impossible. In what circumstances you feel this is even more impossible than others? So because people's consciousness about life is often, sometimes very acute, but not articulated, is not structured. I guess our work, the common consensus approach, is to unpack it, give a structure, to see the different aspects, the feeling that you are completely powerlessness and you are impossible to act is often because you put so many things together without distinguishing one thing from another. So everything lumped together, it just looks very heavy and dark. But if you take apart, then you see all the cracks and holes in it. So therefore, I think that's then we say the common concerns approach will facilitate people to develop even sharper consciousness about their conditions. And I just don't know, at this moment, Alf, do you have any doubt from your psychoanalysis point of view, this method, you feel there's a danger or there is something?
Not feeling about the danger.
Yeah.
I think there are similarities and differences. Similarities in the aim to promote the capacity of our discussant, to find better solutions for his difficulties and problems, and to also to let him evolve, develop, his own capacity to stand up, and to say, what he wants, what he really can feel in his innermost, The difference may be that we think first that we have to deal usually with so-called neurotic people who not only suppress, but have developed symptoms. And symptoms are always a difficult problem to handle for the patient, because it means always an inhibition of the usual capacity to express themselves. They have lost the access to some parts of their own self. And this is our aim, to reconstruct it, to let them develop. Usually this happens quite fast. Yeah.
Meaning during a short period of time? Or
yeah. It often happens already in the beginning of the psychotherapy that the symptoms disappear. Yeah. And this has to do with this. This is an effect of the personal relationship, the trustful relationship which develops. Yeah. Going back to a natural capacity to feeling sympathy and empathy for the other one. Yeah? And this works from both sides. We call it also the matching. But this means I can't work with all people. Yeah? I must really start first to consider if there are some deeper difficulties with this individual. Doesn't matter if it comes from his side or from my side. And then I would be better to send him to a colleague.
Yeah. So that's extremely interesting. And now I'm wondering, these two disciplines actually can be really complementary to each other. First of all, I think your target group is slightly different from ours, right? Because yours is people, at least themselves, feel their symptoms. They have this something need direct intervention, very individualized intervention. But we face more general public. And our issue is more social rather than the individual psychological symptoms. Secondly, it is as if you look into the well of life history, lots of childhood memory and etc., in order to reconstruct the person as a functioning and even flourishing agent again. But for us is not to reconstruct the person per se, but actually is to how the person can be reconnected to society in a new way. If the person have heightened consciousness about the social problems, they are able to see social problems more sharply, as I said, they can take things apart, distinguishing one type of contradiction from another type, is capable of giving structure to the everyday situation. And then it is a more outward orientation. It's not about myself, but is about my relation to my surrounding. And probably third difference is in your work that individual life history is very important. But for our work is kind of how are you going to do now? What are you facing? Right? The social environment is something you have to face. You have to move forward, sometimes move against. But against is also a type of forward. It's not running away. So I think it's a really complementary. I mean, this is probably the beauty of human science. Human is such a complex creature. We just need different ways to understand and intervene. So now I wanted to go back to the question of the social unconscious in our professions, research. So to be honest, when I try to kind of experiment the common consensus approach, I think I found that one of the most difficult aspect is how researchers define his or her own labor. For us, for me at least, common consensus approach is the attitude, actually, fundamentally, is the attitude. How are you going to see your relation to your labor and your relation to the world? No? Your labor will create something. What kind of thing is this? Of course, it is a text, a book or article. But what kind of impact do you want that article have? On whom? In the world? For how long? For what purpose? Is this just for published in a journal and cataloged in library, so therefore become part of CV? Or is, you are compelled by deep concerns of some issues. You write this article as an answer, or you want to bring in a new understanding about future, and etc. So that is, if the first attitude will no way lead to the common consensus approach type of research. So you have to be very conscious about our work itself as a social practice. So now I heard that you also commented in your profession, we think Germany in a way is a wonderful place for psychotherapists because it's very popular and it's supported by government and etc. But you also have some reservations that institutionalization and professionalization will lead to certain type of social unconsciousness among the practitioners. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I found it useful to use a concept to differentiate between the individual unconscious, which develops according to the very special individual experiences as a child, as an adolescent, and as an adult. So this belongs to the individual and is often in the center of our psychotherapeutic work. But what is usually excluded is the so-called social unconscious. For instance, in my psychoanalytic work with German patients, usually we would not discuss what it means to shake hands. But of course, it's a gesture which has a meaning, which is different from, when I work in China, often found 2 pots of tea at the table when I enter the room for a therapeutic conversation. I found it quite comfortable to have this, but I felt an inhibition first to discuss it with my psychoanalytic colleagues. Because in psychoanalysis, we don't use we may think, we should not spoil our patients and also not spoil our own self during the work. It should always be a working situation. Yeah, you look, it feels strange for you. Yes. But you see, these are cultural differences, usually not in our conscious mind. And because they are not conscious, they become only conscious if you go into another country, if you visit friends in other culture. And then you may feel, that's strange for me. Okay, but to use this method also to think about how we, for instance, as psychoanalysts and psychotherapists in China, are embedded in an institutionalized system. This means in Germany, psychotherapy, the different kinds of psychotherapy, different approaches are paid by the public health insurance. This means you must not argue with your patient about the fee. The fee is fixed already. But this fee for psychotherapy is fixed according to the average income of medical doctors, of different disciplines of medical doctors. This has been a result of long-lasting negotiations. But what does it mean today for us? We earn a lot of money if we work as professional psychotherapists in China, but we must not question if this fee is really justified. We must not compare our work, for instance, with the work of social workers who earn much more less, as we can earn. Or primary school teachers who earn such a low salary. And I think the students in primary school, this is the most important time. So they should have a better income. But this is expelled from our conscious awareness.
And also you mentioned that actually can have quite significant intellectual consequences. Once you are unaware of this social consciousness, somehow you are become blind to other issues because you compared the French and with the German psychotherapists.
I compared it with the situation of French psychoanalysis. Many French psychoanalysts publish in newspapers, in journals, also for the public, But this is quite seldom in Germany. So I miss it. Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Maybe they are too spoiled.
Oh, no,
Why
it is
we
rare
earn
in
our
Germany?
money.
Yeah, okay.
But in France, they have not this system with reimbursement by the public health insurance system. They must also publish themselves, yeah, to get a name and to find patients. So it's a different cultural situation which leads to different outcome of outreach for the public, yeah, of being present in the public. And of course, it has also to do with the question of our social responsibility as psychoanalysts, but of course also as researchers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you also mentioned actually when the French psychotherapists publish, it's not only to advertise themselves, but they also make lots of critical and interesting analysis.
Yes. Yeah. And this is underdeveloped in Germany, I think, until today. I speak it out as my wish that we could find more thinking about social questions, about culture, discussion from a psychoanalytic point of view about art productions, about movies, about literature, and so on.
Yeah.
And this is also seldom in the training as a psychoanalyst in Germany. Yeah. It's more concentrated as clinical work with patients. Yeah? And I would wish more a development of a critical perspective for all psychoanalysts.
Actually, this is very similar to what happened in academic world, because if you go to the so-called global south, but situation in the world today changed a lot. But at least 10 years ago, if you go to India, so all sociologists, almost by definition, are public intellectuals. Part of the reason is the university salary is so low.
Yeah.
So they just have to, publish more in the newspaper or appear on TV, not only for money, because you can't get too much money either, but you don't feel that you are such, the membership in a university is so important. Actually, you feel freer. The fact that the salary is quite low, and also university don't dare to ask you to do too many things in that was, I'm talking about 10 years ago. Then you just naturally become more aware of everything happening around you. You are using your sociological or anthropological perspectives to make critiques. And then you feel you have a more social reward, even less money award, but you publish, you recognize a public intellectual, and you have more things to say. And also simply your mind is more stimulated. But in the global south, except I suppose France somehow has a special tradition. But even in the UK, it has a very strong tradition. Over the days, you have intellectuals comment all kinds of things. It has become rarer and rarer that university professors will stand up to make a commentary on any issues of the day because they're so tied to the professional work defined by their institutions. No? On one hand, of course, it's the research condition is very good, the working condition is very good inside of the institution, but at the same time, the thinking become much more technical and become much narrower. Yeah. On that point, I don't know, Alfred. I wonder whether or not you can go back to your useful time. No, we are talking about, you said, okay, now your psychoanalysis training also become very clinically oriented and very narrow, and there's no liberal arts and critical thinking training. And one of the most, I think, highlight moment in 20th century of social science is early Frankfurt School, which combined Freud with Marx, combined, the psychoanalysis theory with political economy theory, and with a very down-to-earth, action-oriented revolutionary agenda basically to say we have to do something. Read the books is a part of doing already, but read the books in order to do something.
Yeah.
But the work is, if you read Marcuse, Adorno, it is a serious intellectual work. It's not a shouting slogan. The logic is very rigorous and step by step how the argument was made. Do you think it is still possible to bring this kind of different thought together to create that kind of effect to avoid continuing over professionalization in thinking? Or do you think actually that time can never return anymore? And if we want to try something new or try to broaden our thinking, we have to do something else?
I hope that there is still this possibility. Because, of course, if we look at the actual situation, for instance, here in Europe, we are confronted with a lot of new questions. We thought they have been overcome. They will never appear again. The question of war. Yeah? What does it mean to prepare for a next war? Yeah? What does it mean to spend so many money for the military equipment now,
yeah.
for instance? Or what does it mean if our political leaders argue with double standards in different questions? And I think we must confront ourselves again and come back to this thinking, of this time. For instance, now here in Germany, we have to think about the success of a right-wing party.
Yeah.
What does it mean? Must we not go back to the research results about authoritarian personality?
Exactly.
Could it be useful? What may it mean for so many people to believe in new leaders, omnipotent leaders, to develop omnipotent fantasies, to develop projective, paranoid fantasies about others, strange people, foreigners, And the other part of thinking which would be important again, what does it make with us that we are still living in such a spoiled situation compared with the rest of the world?
Yes.
And what about our responsibility for ecological questions?
Yeah.
For consumerism? And so there are so many, we call it in German language, burning demands.
Okay.
That I think there is a need to look back and to start again.
I really love that, the 2 points, burning demand. The common concern approach is very much to say, we do research must to meet and speak to the demand. Actually, the good news for us is that there's a huge public demand for thought because people want better understanding. They need more accurate, more piercing, more powerful concepts that they can use. They don't want the concepts that are imposed by some expert on top of their head. They want some meaningful and effective concepts that they can use to understand the situation more accurately. So that is a part of the burning demand, the intellectual demand. And also, I think the point you made, current condition in Europe and in the world is really cannot be solved simply through one single discipline. For instance, in Germany, militarization is an economic question, the government debt question, right? And then it is a political question, it's obvious, but it also is very much a personality question. Military means a certain way of looking at yourself, certain way of you relate yourself to order, to authority. And for many people, order has a beauty. You can kind of be military, lots of military ceremony, etc. is very arousing, actually. Because I come from China, I know that that sublime effect create on your unconsciousness actually can be very, very powerful. And in order to make all this visible to ourselves, I think it is natural. We need knowledge about the economy, about the politics, about the governance, about how people make meaning of all this, and the consciousness as well as the unconsciousness.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alf. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
This has been a great conversation.
Exchange of thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us for this wonderful conversation. And thank you, Alf, again. So see you next time. We will be talking about confronting, which is a topic very closely related to today's episode. Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Common Concerns Podcast.